Hello again. Welcome back to the Vale Music Industry Conference podcast series, sponsored by Vale Music Group. I'm here with John Diliberto, who is a radio executive and radio producer and hosts the Echoes show, which you can listen to locally on 88.7 WXPN out of Philadelphia. So, John, it's very good to meet you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's talk about your beginnings with radio. Mm-hmm. What was your first experience with kind of the radio industry?
Very easy. I was a student at Penn, and these two guys, Pat Sherborne and Emmett Ryan, had a class in the Free University, which was this like school at night, no credit or anything, and it was called The Art of Radio. And I said, well, that sounds interesting. So I went, and I was really into music, heavy into music, and but not a musician. So I thought this was a good way to get into that. So I took that class with these guys, and they said, when you finish the class, you'll be eligible to get a shift on WXPN, which was the student station at the time. And so I did it, and I got on XPN.
My goodness. It sounds like, how big was WXPN at that time?
In terms of
like a listener
You know what,
radius?
we didn't have ratings or anything, but I think it was pretty big. I mean, for a college station, and it was, at that time, a legitimate college station. I think we had a lot of listeners. I mean, we were raising, by the time I stopped going there, we were raising close to $200,000, like an on-air fundraiser. So,
how long did you have the show there at XPN?
I was at XPN from about 74 and actually till about 85.
So after that, did you have your own like independently produced shows after that?
What happened was, I did shows on XPN. I created some shows, some of which are still on, like Star's End. I created in 75, and that show is still on the air there with somebody else doing it. I started doing my own productions in 81, 82, started doing music documentaries. First one was called Electronic Minstrels, Artists in Electronic Sound, I think. And we profiled like 5 electronic musicians, which in 81 was still kind of a novelty sort of thing. And so that started doing that, did a few more documentaries, won an Armstrong Award for one of them, and then started doing this show called Totally Wired, which we did from 82 until 89. And that was a weekly new music documentary. Started out as electronic, but eventually wound up being more just new music. Contemporary music, and we did that until 89. I think we did 120-something programs, and then we went to Echoes right off of that.
So those previous shows, was it mostly playing recordings?
No, those were all interviews.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you go about finding these new artists, or do they come to you at this point?
Well, it's both. I mean, yes, certainly now I've got kind of a reputation, so they do come to me unbidden. But I'm still going out and seeking stuff and listening to things. I'll hear things on the radio. When I'm watching TV, I sit there with Shazam open. So when I hear a tune that I don't know, boom, I'll pop it in, and I'll get it off of that. I use Spotify a lot to do a lot of research there. If I hear a name, I'll go to Spotify and check them out, see if there's something I can use or that I like, which isn't always the same thing.
So you mentioned you got TV and you got Spotify. What about going out to live shows? Do you ever do that?
It's funny. Someone else asked that question in the session. I would never go to a live show to check out music. Unless I was going to like a festival. Like I was just at the Mountain Oasis Electronic Music Summit in Nashville like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And so there, I forget, there was 70 acts or something over 3 days. So I checked out a couple of acts that, I didn't really know. So I would do that, but I would never go to a concert to check out the music. The rate of return is just not high enough.
So you started out with mainly electronic music, right?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see why you'd say that. But I've always, I wrote for Downbeat magazine, and I was covering jazz, mostly avant-garde jazz. So I started out that way. Really, I'm as much of a jazz head as I am an electronic head. Yeah.
So your show now, you have like soundscapes and you do like different themes and stuff. How has the audience changed, especially with the electronic music? Do you find that more people are listening to electronic music as time goes on, or have you seen like ebbs and flows?
It ebbs and flows, but I think there's definitely more. I mean, it's you don't even think about it almost these days. You know, I still use that as a descriptive, but electronic music is just so pervasive. You know, I mean, Lady Gaga is electronic music. You know, Pink is electronic music. I mean, that's all electronic music. It's just everywhere now.
How about back when it was first starting? You said back in the '80s. Was it more difficult to get an audience that back then?
It was and it wasn't. Like I said, the show that I did on XPN, for instance, the show called Diaspar, which was on 5 nights a week, 4 to 6 hours. And it was a very progressive music show. We played a lot of electronic music, and we had a big audience. And we, concerts, bands that we were playing, like Tangerine Dream, were playing, 5,000 seat theaters, like the Tower. So there was an audience for that music even back then. Yeah.
Did you work on the radio station there as a student?
As a student,
Okay.
I started as a student.
How did you balance all of that, having a radio show that's that well known, especially then, along with classes and other things like that?
I didn't. I went to school. I went to school as a liberal arts major, American Civilization to be specific, but I majored in radio. I didn't get a degree for that. Didn't get credit for that. I majored in radio. I would go do a radio show before I go to a class.
So, do you regret? You obviously probably don't regret going to University of Pennsylvania.
Oh no,
Okay.
absolutely not.
What about if you could go back? Do you think you would choose a different area of study, maybe a communications or
Yes.
something like that?
Absolutely.
And how do you think that would have helped you?
Oh, I think would have put me in a different place in my career. I think I probably would have been in a much more a larger situation, a more maybe academic situation, perhaps, or a more managerial situation, or a more research oriented thing, which is like Penn's. That's one reason I didn't do Penn's communication program, because it was very theoretical. It was not hands-on. It was not doing radio. It was very theoretical in terms of its communication, but it still would have helped me immensely. I should have done it.
Do you think you'd be in radio even now if you had done that?
I don't know if I'd be in radio. I think I'd be in communications somewhere, but not necessarily radio. Yeah.
And with your show now, do you find that you have sort of a more niche audience, or are you?
It's definitely a niche audience. It's definitely a niche.
So
audience.
how do you go about getting new listeners?
The same way everyone else does. We're up there on Facebook and doing all of the social media things. I mean, I think we're fairly active doing that, and that's really the main way. Like I said in this panel, really, listeners are our second thing that we go after. The first thing we go after is radio stations. So program directors are our first audience. Okay. And listeners are the second audience.
So we have WLVC here, which is kind of a small radio program at a small school. What kind of things could you recommend to those who might not have the biggest audience but still love doing radio?
Recommend in terms of what?
In terms of like how you could possibly get more people to listen to.
Mm-hmm. Is it a carrier current station? Does it just go to the dorms, or is it?
It's mainly online, just online streaming.
Online, yeah. Then you got to use social media. What else is there? I mean, if you're dealing with a small campus, obviously you could do things like putting up posters, things like that. Because people might be hip to what you're doing. You might be doing something, a specialty show that people are into, but it's not there.
So, what would you recommend for those who are at the small school but want to, after they graduate, kind of get into the bigger picture?
Mm-hmm. I think they should start while they're in the small school. If you think you want to go into radio, you should start going to the stations, try and do internships, go to shows like us or World Cafe, places like that, and try and get internships to work on those shows. And I think that's the best inroad you could find.
Did you do any internships, or were you just did the campus radio?
Campus radio, just went right into it.
That's impressive. Yeah. Wow, you just went there and then you just got bigger then.
Yeah.
Do you think that XPN getting bigger has helped you with your own audience and your own shows?
Well,
you're not just played on XPN, are you?
Oh no, we're on about 110 stations around the country. Yeah. XPN have definitely helped. So I mean, they bring an audience to us. Their audience is way bigger than it was when I was there, and that audience comes to us, or at least some of it. So yeah.
So you have your own independent shows. How do you stay connected with kind of your home station there at XPN?
Well, they're not really our home station, because we're an independent production. They're affiliates. You know, and I obviously have a connection to them because I was there for so long, and I know all the people there, and you know, there is an almost familial connection with XPN, but we are an independent show. You know, I actually do a show on XPN. I don't know if you knew that or not. I do a Sunday morning show called Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah.
Right. So I do that, but I do that in my own studio. Okay. I just send them the files. You know, I check my mailbox like once a year at XPN. I'm never there.
For Echoes, is that also at your home studio?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's not my home, but
okay.
Yes, it used to be though.
So, is it who all is on your staff there for Echoes?
Jeff Town is my producer and engineer, and Lori Daniels is my kind of office manager.
So, what do you have any role beyond being kind of the voice and doing?
Yes, I run
stuff?
The show. I mean,
you're kind of like
I'm the executive producer.
Okay.
I'm like it. Yeah. I'm the money guy. I'm everything.
So I hear a lot of these young kids in the kind of the recording industry, like I hear them all say radio's dead, radio's going down the drain. What do you say to that? Do you agree with that?
It's not going down the drain, but it's diminishing for sure. I mean, but everything is. What isn't? I mean, yes, there are things that are growing. So online things are growing, and that's where radio audience is going. Although having said that, NPR, National Public Radio, their audience is growing. For NPR proper, their audience is growing. It's one of the few audiences in radio that's growing. I think maybe Latin radio, Hispanic radio is growing.
Do you foresee any problems for your own shows, given that?
Yes. No, I'm having the problems now.
What kind?
Well, for instance, here we used to be on WITF in Harrisburg. We'd been on there for years, since, I don't know, 93, 94, something like that. And, you know, suddenly they decided they wanted to go another way. They went all, you know, pretty much all syndicated programming in terms of, like, you know, the big national things. So I think they replaced us with the BBC because they want more news. They want almost all news talk. So that's a big challenge for us, is these NPR stations, public radio stations, in major markets, especially the major stations, going news talk, which means no music.
So how do you, in light of you trying to retain your kind of artistic integrity with trying to keep your music, how do you balance that and then trying to get more people to listen to your shows?
Yeah, well, that's artistic integrity. Okay. That's a big question. My artistic integrity has never changed. I mean, and actually we have done some significant changes in the programming of the show recently, but in terms of the artistic integrity part of it, I think it's there. I'm not going to change that. The show will just go away if that's not viable, and it's possible it couldn't be viable.
So, do you foresee your show transferring to online, as you said that, or you think radio is going to go more online?
No, because there's no money in online. Unless you're Spotify
right.
or Pandora, there's no money for, like, the individual person online.
Does that frighten you at all? Is that
yes?
Oh man, that
yes.
seems.
I'm like, you know, I'm later in my life than I am earlier. You know, I've been doing this. Echoes is entering its 25th year. We'll be 25 next October. So I've been doing the same thing for a long time. So to think about doing something else, you know, at the age that I'm at with the experience that I've had, that's not an easy proposition. I'm sure there will be something. I'm sure I've developed skills that are transferable to other things, and I think I might have, you know, a certain amount of demand as a producer, as an executive producer, as a voice, you know. So something will happen.
Right.
But, you know, right now it's, you know, full steam ahead with Echoes as far as I'm concerned.
All right. Well, cool. Well,
Yeah.
that's kind of all that we have time for. So thank you so much
You're
for your
welcome.
time here. And that's it for this installment of the Vale Music Conference podcast series. And as always, thanks for listening.